All right, we are live on YouTube. So hi everyone, this is Jim and welcome to the Kyverno community meeting for May 19th. Shooting, do you want to read out the agenda topics and we can get started?
Sure. Hello everyone, this is Shooting. So today we prepared a few demos that for the new features we added in 136. And also we have Frank to show his policy new changes in the policy reporter. And we will have Yash presenting his Prometheus matrix integration process. So this new Prometheus matrix will be released in the next Kyverno release. And then we'll give an updates about what's currently on our roadmap and the next step. All right, so before we get started, please add yourself to the attendance. All right, and so first session for the demos and updates, we for the release 136, we have drafted this blog post. I also attached the link in this meeting doc. So if you pull up the blog post, we have listed new features we added. We give the example, we give the resources so that you can like play with it on your own. And also it's kind of like announcing that what's new in this release. Okay, and come to the demo part. Yash, I saw you added another topic here. Do you want to demo first or you want to wait till the demo section?
Yeah, sure, I can begin. So, so I'll just share my screen. It says, yeah. So the screen should be visible now.
Yep.
Yeah. So basically, functionally speaking, the development part of the Prometheus integration has been done. So just a quick summary about this whole project. So basically, as a part of increasing the observability aspect of Kyverno, we were working on this project of Prometheus integration, where Prometheus, where Kyverno would actually end up exposing a good bunch of metrics around basically the entire cluster-wide state of Kyverno policies, be it latency associated with admission requests or background scans or the number of cluster policies, namespace policies, rule level execution, so multiple kind of metrics. So right now we are exposing 5 metrics, but they have a diverse form of granularity. And right now I've prepared a prototype dashboard. It might not be representing the best metrics, but this is just a prototype depicting what are the capabilities of this integration. So first of all, we can keep let's start with the higher level granularity, so the cluster-wide granularity. So we can easily track number of cluster policies and number of namespace policies, and we can even track like the liveness or the dead policies as well. So for example, if currently, let's say like 1 hour ago 2 policies were created, but now they have been deleted. So those deleted policies can be tracked as well. And so basically this kind of metric is good in situations where as a cluster administrator, you want to be alerted when suddenly a massive amount of policies are being created, because a massive amount of policies being created is going to take a toll on the performance of Kyverno. So those kinds of alerts can be set up on this kind of count metric. Then moving on to rule level, like metrics, possible metrics with the granularity of rule level. So basically, you can track the number of currently active Kyverno rules which are applied over a cluster. So if you look at this panel, so it clearly depicts basically currently how many rules are applied over the cluster. So this clearly showed by the legend that okay, right now at this point 5 minutes ago, 25 validated rules were applied, 1 mutate rule and 1 generate rule was applied. And again, at the same rule level, you can also track the rule execution latency. So there might be some situations where you might have constructed a rule in such a way in not the most efficient form. So you might actually, as a cluster administrator, you might actually want to track that, okay, which rule is possibly hogging the resources or consuming the maximum amount of latency. So this kind of this panel, the average rule latency, for example, panel, can actually depict that. So moving on, we have policy level metrics. So basically these policy level metrics are making use of the same metrics, but it is grouping over at the level of policies. So you basically would not have to deal with a different set of metrics just because your granularity changed from rule to policy. So depicting the policy level metrics here, the first one is the average policy execution latency. So let's say you have a lot of policies across your cluster, be it cluster level, cluster policies, or namespace policy. So you can actually track the policy execution latency as well. So there might be some situations where you might have a policy which is quite heavy. It has a lot of some validate rules, some generate rules, and it is taking a lot of time to execute. So you, as a cluster administrator, you might want to see which is like as a cluster-wide thing, which policy might be causing that kind of spike. Or from a whole cluster-wide standpoint, how is Kyverno performing at the level of policies? And then you can easily track the current count of policies present in the cluster. Like for example, you have 10, 12, any number. So this is right now depicting a total number of policies. Like in the top, actually, the stat panels are showing cluster namespace, whereas this panel, the active Kyverno policies panel, is actually showing a trend of how many policies were there at each timestamp actively present over the cluster. Finally, there's another metric which actually shows the history associated with Kyverno policies applied over a cluster. So, and this is depicted by this panel of policy level changes. So for example, as a cluster administrator, you want to track that, okay, in the last 24 hours, how many policies were created, or how many policies were updated, or how many policies were deleted. You can actually track with this metric. So it's kind of like a history of the metric. It gives the history of the changes associated at the policy level. This metric is not is dedicatedly supposed to be at the policy level, because initially we planned to keep it at the rule level, but that could have increased, like spiked up the cardinality to a like insane extent. So that could have taken a toll on the metrics, and it wasn't representing that great use cases as well. So this specific metric of tracking policy level changes, it's only it has a granularity till policy only. And finally, we have a metric called admission review latency metric, which is actually tracking the latencies associated with the admission review. So let's say, for example, I ran a command kubectl run nginx, for example. I created a pod, and that pod ended up, let's say, triggering 2 cluster policies and a namespace policy. So this metric, admission review latency, will actually track the end-to-end latency associated with running all those 3 policies for that pod. So even those kind of situations can be tracked with this admission review latency metric. And by the way, coming back to the rule execution latency metric, I forgot to tell one thing. So rule execution latency metric can also be further segregated on the basis of whether the rule executed as a part of an admission request or a background scan request. So it has a label called rule execution cost, and it has 2 possible values, either admission request or a background scan. So this might be very like a lot of details, but yeah, this is to give a general idea that what kind of and what level of granularity these metrics provide. So that's how the Prometheus integration has been developed. Apart from that, we are working on the documentation. So right now the content is pretty much ready of the documentation, but we are still kind of ideating and brainstorming around how we should format the documentation so as to make it present in the website in the most appealing way, because there's a lot of details, right? The description of the metrics, and we are even looking forward to providing some good set of sample metric queries, so that, let's say, even if a user does not know PromQL language, still they can make use of those metric queries directly into their Grafana panels. So as to know, those queries are going to be basically general, real life, useful queries, like these panels actually. Like these panels, these kind of queries are useful in pretty much any situation. So that's pretty much it about this demo. Any suggestions, any questions?
Is this dashboard that you created, is this something that is going to be shared with the community?
No, so right now I created it on my own. I just wanted to, this is just a prototype dashboard. I feel that as a part of sharing a dashboard with the community, I would suggest to create another dashboard which should be depicting more mature insights and all. But yeah, like as of now, this is like I only locally created this dashboard.
Yeah, I get it. I think it would be valuable though to have something that's pre-constructed to offer to users as a way to fast track their experience with getting Kyverno metrics, and then let them hack and slash it as they want. If they want to remove widgets, they'll let them do it. But this is a what you put together is nice. This just might be, I know at least for me, I would like to have something like this to start off with to get me started in the right direction. So I would consider, I would suggest that find some way to make this and other dashboards potentially available as well.
Sure. Actually, Chip, we actually have a kind of a plan planned out down the road. So like we are planning to actually integrate, actually make the utilization of this Prometheus integration into the France policy exporter. So the plan is that once this thing is rolled out, the whole Prometheus integration, then Frank and I will work possibly together to make sure that the policy reporter spins up a dashboard for you as well, which is a fully cooked up Kyverno metric related dashboard. But yeah, of course, as a part of the release of this Prometheus integration as well, we can surely release a sample toy dashboard, which is pretty general for and useful for real life scenarios.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think we can put that in a separate repo as well, right? So there's no harm in doing both. Just create a separate repo and have the dashboards in there, and then integrate with the policy exporter as well.
Yes. Yep. All right. Anyone else has any suggestions, any questions? Anything?
This is great. I think what would be good is maybe, I know there are a few folks running at some significant scale, so maybe we can connect the dots and see if they can try this out. And I think the next step is obviously to understand what insights we are finding from here, what if there are some rules in terms of execution times that we see taking longer, things like that, right? So by the way, one of the things we saw is as we were polling users, and Ritesh from Nirmata has been doing this, is asking about, what are the top features required for production usage of Kyverno, and this almost always, along with HA, ranks in the top 3, right? So definitely a lot of folks are looking for this type of observability, so the sooner we can get this out, publish the dashboards, get more feedback, that'll be great.
Yeah. All right then. Yeah. So I guess if that's pretty much it, then yeah, feel like if anyone has any other suggestions, then please feel free to shoot on Kyverno's channel, or you can even reach out to me personally. No issues regarding that. So yeah, that's about it, I guess.
Okay, this is great. Thanks, Yash.
Thank you.
And next we'll have Frank talking about the changes in the policy reporter. Frank, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I will also share my screen. So you see my screen with GitHub open?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. At first, small introduction about the structure. So the Kyverno dashboard is the first plugin. So it's an optional feature you can activate, and it's developed as a separate microservice. So if you don't activate it, it's not available, and it has no overhead in your cluster. Yeah, it's available as separate Git repo, and it uses Kyverno CRDs to get information about what policies are running, what rules are running, what rules are generated, and how things are configured. This plugin provides 2 APIs. As the policy reporter, you have a REST API, which returns all available policies in the cluster as REST, which uses the UI to generate the dashboard. The second part is also a metric with similar information, but I have no pre-configured dashboards yet. Currently, only the UI uses this REST API to create this new dashboard. Yeah, the dashboard, as I said, uses the CRDs to get the general information about the running policies. You have 2 small graphs about how many policies are in which category. If you don't have a category provided, you have the standard no category section. And you have the second diagram with how many validation, mutation, or generation policies you have. You have a table with all available policies, and to get a quick overview of how your policies are configured and what are available, I have this Yaml overview. So this provides you all possible information you want to have about your policies, how it's configured, and as addition, you not only see the rules you created or you provided, you also see the generated rules that comes from Kyverno. This gives you an overview how this policy works. And the second part is a separate detailed page. I have one custom policy provided, which checks if your pods have liveness or readiness probes. So you see the name, you see a description, you can see if the background scan is enabled. You also see, as additional information from the policy reporter, how many passed results and failed results you have. You get a list of all rules are provided, and you have also, as additional information from the policy reporter, a quick look how many pods are failing or passed for this special policy. You see the message from your rule, and you can search for this. Have the same functionality as in the policy reports dashboard, but especially for this one policy. And at the bottom, you also get the information about the YAML. So you have all information you can get from the CRD in a graphical UI. And that's the current state. That's it basically. From the mutation and generation policies, you don't have that much information. You also see them in the table from the category. You also have a details page, but without the passed and failed results tables because they don't have any results. So that's the current state. And any questions on that? If not, we continue with the next topic.
No, this looks nice. I noticed that you have logs panel there. Do we store historical logs or?
That's related to the policy reporter. So policy reporter has, as addition to their dashboards and graphs, this logs feature where you get information about new violations. And you can just combine with Loki from Grafana and Elasticsearch and so on. And to have also a standalone mode for this functionality, you have this log panel. And when I create any pod that don't fit any rule, then you get a new violation, and this plopped up in this log panel.
Oh, nice. Are this message extracted from the events, or how do we capture?
That comes from the policy report CRD. So the policy reporter persists the latest state of a report. And if a new update event comes from a report, it checks for new violations in this new update. And if there is any new violation, it pushes this to targets like Loki. It has some limitations, but in the meantime, it works well.
Yeah, it looks nice.
So, any other questions or feedback?
Those look good.
Okay, if there's no questions, then next we'll have Max demo 2 new features added in 136. First is the list to support list operator. Another is supporting Genius Pass. And I believe it's in JSON patches, mutate policies.
Yeah, so let me share my screen. Tell me if you see anything.
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, so let me start from the list operators. Now we can validate a list with one condition that is written on the list field in the policy. Let me show you how it looks like. And here we have a policy, and for example, we have to validate a pod and specify in one little filter that we want to exclude all such pods that have -c command in its list. So the command is actually a list of strings. I forgot to tell you that this notation works only for literal scalar types. So it will not work for any objects or arrays nested to the object. So in case if we have this condition and also we have such a resource here, so we have a list of strings and -c inside it. So this pod, this job that will create a pod should be banned. Let's try. And here we have an error message that tells us that the commands contains the abandoned, forbidden -c element. This policy also have another notation with square brackets. So if we wrap it with square brackets, we will have the same result. Let's apply these changes to our policy. And try to create a resource again. And we have the same result. So in case if we remove such an element, the policy will be created, the job will be created. That's it for this feature, and also we have added a feature with additional functions in JMS Pass for operating with strings. It made our policy application much more powerful, especially with regular expressions. So let me clear my cluster and I will show you. So let's start with replace all, the simplest function I will demonstrate today. Let's see the policy that we have here. So here we have a mutation policy that declares that all the such pods with containers that have in its image such a string should be replaced with Docker IO. let's try to do this. I didn't show you the resource. So the resource looks like that. We have the string specified in both images, and we want to substitute it to the index.docker.io. Okay, so deployment is created, a mutation rule is applied, and let's see the mutation result. So here we have index.docker.io in both images, so the mutation is successful. Okay, so the next will be more complicated. Let's say if we have not just replace a registry, but replace an image registry with some condition. For example, let me show you. For example, let's say we have next resource with 3 containers, and we want to substitute the registry if we have it and add it if we don't have it. So for this all 3 images, we should have my registry.corp.com busybox 1.28. Let's try. So here's the policy. We have this operator here because regex replace all have an escape characters, and in case if we want to avoid any escaping, we must have a raw string. To achieve this, we use such notation. And let's check if mutation is applied. So yeah, here we have all the images are the same, and the registry is substituted here and added in this case, and actually it worked. So yeah, and the last case I think is the most powerful. It uses regex match to make validate policy more flexible. Oh. Regex match. So what I mean is, look at this policy. It says that we should deny all such policies that have all such ingress resources that have a host inside it different from this pattern. And this pattern declares that a host should be should end with a staging .domain.com. And also it should work and also it should work for all the rules. If we have such a resource with a separate several rules, and also we have different hosts. One host is ending with a staging.domain.com, and one is should fail this rule. In case if anything of this, any of these hosts fails this rule, the policy validation will fail, and resource will not created. So let's try. So yeah, here we have one of the host names violating the rule, and validation has failed. Let us modify the resource so it should pass the validation. We could just delete this rule, actually. Oh, I think I deleted something else. Maybe we could fix it. And it has been created. So the rule works fine. And that's it from me. Do you have any questions?
That's great. I noticed that the last policy has the minimum version as 132. Is that just typo or something we already merged?
Let me see. I took this policy from examples, so I don't really know. Maybe I'm not sure it will work at this version. I think we should bump it here to 136, and it will work okay. So I think at version 132 it will not work.
Right. I think the minimum version is 136. I actually have another question regarding the first policy you showed, because you used two different syntax and the policy definition. One is to take the single string and another to use the square bracket representing the array value, right? So I was wondering, like, of course, we're iterating through all the items in the resource array, but if we specify as the array here, does it allow to take multiple values or multiple patterns here, or we just allow single pattern?
No, it is not allowed to put here several patterns, but we could add them here using a logical operator OR. So it will just look like I don't know, like or AND. So it could be like this, and
Okay.
it will work.
Okay. And this actually, it does the for each logic, right? Because here we have only single pattern, but we will check all the items in the array of the resource.
Yeah. So this is condition like for each element of the scalar, each element in the array of scalar values.
Okay. And just to confirm, the equality anchor here is not necessary, right? We can always strip it out. Just
Which anchor?
the equality anchor.
Yeah, I think yes.
Okay, cool.
Maybe
Yeah,
other
this is
questions?
very powerful. I think one thing we had talked about for the mutate is, do we still want to rename from patches strategic merge to something like, I think we talked about calling it something like patch strategic merge generator. I don't know if it's necessary, but it was just to kind of explain. Max, if you bring up that example you had with the mutate rule.
Which one?
So I think where you had the mutate on the list.
To the
Mutate.
registry.
Yes.
Okay, there are still two examples with the registry.
So where you're
Okay.
replacing the registry is fine, right? So the replace all.
With the regex or
Sure.
replace all? Regex, replace all. Okay.
Yeah, so here we're calling it patch strategic merge. And previously, when we were using a patch strategic merge, the expectation was it would, be applied directly as a patch, right? Just like a customize or a kubectl patch. Now what we're doing is we're using that definition almost as a template to internally generate the right patches. So is there any use case to provide both? Like in some cases, if a user precisely wants to say, this is the patch I want to define and apply, in which case we won't apply to a list, we will just apply a specific patch. But in other cases, we have something like patch strategic merge generator or template or something like that, which tells us that we need to generate the right patches based on the pattern the user has specified.
Okay, so as far as I know, we use it really as a template that just overlays the user's resource. And not long ago, I didn't really couldn't distinguish this logic from the overlay. They are both generating patches, both
Right.
overlay and patch strategic merge. And I currently I'm not sure how it works in depth. So I wrote a specification with expected results, and for patch strategic merge, in some cases it doesn't work with the array of objects. And I think I will discuss this type of policy with you and shooting more more deeply. So for now, I can't answer your question.
Yeah, I can add to that. I think the reason we want to make it like a patch strategic merge generator is that because the merge key is different for different tags.
Right.
This is the case in customize. And if you see this policy, in the name field, we add the anchor and take the value as start. So this is the logic we handled inside Kyverno to make sure we're iterating through all the containers list. And the same thing happens with the wall and apply. That think about the environment variable list for each container. I think the default merge strategy is replace instead of merge, so that if you patch something to the existing environment list, or to say customize will replace the entire env list. So this is something we want. This is the reason we want to use that generator before we actually applying the pattern or the overlay to the resource, to make sure that we kind of do the merge logic.
Right. Okay. So it seems like that maybe there might be use cases where we need to allow that flexibility to either do a direct patch that the user has specified, or for us to in Kyverno to be able to generate the right patches based on some template or specification the user is providing.
Right. I think we logged the issue to support, I think it's equality anchor and mutate policy. I believe Max previously worked on that, so that we want to copy whatever in the resource list back to the pattern to like generate the right strategic merge patch overlay and then
Okay.
apply it to the resource.
Okay.
And I think for each can potentially handle the FL, but we just need to like finalize what's the approach we want.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So let's maybe set up a separate discussion, or document that somewhere and decide how we will further refine.
Okay.
This is great. I think there's a lot of powerful things that can be done, and it does, handle lists pretty well. So it kind of solves some of the problems. So some increasingly, and I know, Chip, we had a discussion on this in some message thread. It seems like for each would only, the new for each that we're proposing would be necessary when we want to combine external lookups with some processing in a loop. But here, if you're just processing data from the admission review request, or we're processing data we fetch from the API server, what Max demonstrated with JamesPath seems like we can do some fairly powerful things and iterate over self-contained lists, right? So if you don't need to combine with some external calls, but the list is entirely contained in the review request or in the results from an API call, then we don't really necessarily need another for each construct in those type of policy definitions.
Yeah, I'd like to look at it a little bit more in depth, but the other thing there is, do we want to potentially make things more complex by saying you need this thing called for each if you want to do these use cases, and you need to use this other construct if you want to do use cases that don't involve what for each covers? So does it make sense to do that, or does it make sense to just empower a single piece of functionality to cover all of those use cases? And I don't know what the answer is right now, but
right.
That's kind of the trade-off there.
Yeah, so for each would most likely, as we design it, we'll leave that flexibility where you can still loop over things within an admission review request, but I guess it may not be necessary. It would just be an alternate way of doing what you could do in JamesPath as well and apply to a list, right? Or with the strategic merge path generator, or with the pattern support we have for lists already.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
All right, and last we have Venkatesh demo the CLI support for the config map lookup.
So today I'm going to do a quick demo for CLI support for external data lookup. So this improvement allowed passing data into the CLI using config map or the API call. So data can be passed using values.yaml. For example, we have this policy to get a name from the config map, and the dictionary.data, this variable is a config map variable. And in the variable means value.yaml, we have the policy name, then the rule name, which we have the rule name and the value for the variable, and the resource is the simple pod. So now I'm going to apply the policy, the resource, and values.variable.yaml. And as you can see, the namespace and the label get updated. This is for the config map. And another demo which I have is about the API variables, API call variables. So in this we are restricting, so this policy in the URL path we are getting the pod and matching with the node name. And here we are restricting the pods on the node to the 10. And this pod count is the API call variable. And the values.means variable.yaml, I am now passing the pod count 12, and but we are restricting to 10, so it should fail. And this is the normal the pod YAML. So as you can see, we are getting a validation error for the CLI from we can't have more than 10 pods on the node. But if I have reduced to 9 or less than 10, the policy get passed. So this is the small demo for the CLI support for the external data lookup. So any question?
So Venkatesh, any variable will just be able to now replace in the through the variables.yaml, right?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, this is great. One other thing that related to what Max demonstrated and the test command. So I don't know if all of those the custom James path, I think they should all be supported also through the CLI test command, right? So because it would be useful to add these to our kind of set of tests, and also to be able to for users who are trying out policies to use the test command to make sure that the functions and regex and things are working as expected. So I don't know if Venkatesh or Max, if you've tried that, if you've tried those same examples Max demonstrated. Max, have you tried the CLI test command for that?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Yeah, maybe good to verify and make sure that all works as expected. I don't see any reason why it should not. I mean, Venkatesh, do you see anything else we would need to add to support that? Or, I mean, it should work, right?
Yeah, it should work. So I will work with the Max and I will add the test for that.
Okay.
All right, back to our agenda. We have all the demos presented. Thanks, everybody. And currently, the team is focusing on the HA implementation. As Jim mentioned before, for the we want to make the Kyverno a production-ready application. So two important thing. One is the Prometheus matrix. As we saw, Yash already working on that and finalizing the implementation. And the team currently is focusing on the HA part. We had the detailed discussion in one of the previous contributors meeting. And so now we're in the implementation phase. And another important thing is to figure out how we want to support that for each, so that we'll have a standard way in Kyverno to handle the list operation. And I saw we have some bugs reported today, and the team will focusing on the bug fixes as well. I don't know, Jim, if you have anything to add.
No, I think that covers it well. Yeah, it'll be exciting to get HA and all of the observability. And of course, as we continue adding all these other powerful features for more complex policies,
Yep.
looks good.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or issues we want to discuss? All right, I guess that's it for the meeting. Thank you, everybody.